More South Coast coverage. 10 News Conference continues with New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Nice to have you in, Mayor. You haven't been in our studio in a while, but we've had you by Zoom.
You've had me by Zoom, but Zoom's not the real thing, Gene. It's great to be back in studio.
Well, you know, I had Governor Healy on a couple of weeks ago, and I brought up your name.
Yeah.
I said, what's your commitment to the South Coast? You know, when Mayor Mitchell sees you, does he say, don't forget about us? So listen to what the governor said, and then you react to that.
All right.
We understand, are committed to all regions of the state. When I think about the South Coast, Gene, you know, I was visiting the South Coast, I think 2 or 3 days after I was sworn into office. I was back in New Bedford the other day, spent a lot of time in the South Coast, love the region, and there's a lot of opportunity. But, you know, we're not going to get to where we need to be unless there's true state partnership and state commitment. And that includes the commitments that I've made in my budget.
Now, I didn't expect her to say anything else, and I'm sure you didn't. But do you believe her when she says that, you know, I really have a commitment to your region?
I have a lot of confidence in her. I've known her for a long time. We went to college together. I've had, you know, a strong relationship with her over the years.
Right.
And even though I tried in her last appearance here to get to tell everybody that this was her favorite part of Massachusetts, I couldn't go that far. She, I think, she understands what we're trying to do, right? She governs the whole state, including Greater Boston, which is living through a golden age, whether they recognize it or not. And then there's much of the rest of Massachusetts that has to hustle to grow and to prosper. We're one of those places. And so she knows that we're trying to compete as intensely as we can for offshore wind investment. That's going well, but the state plays a big part in that. We're trying to ensure that our schools continue to progress, that the state plays a huge part in that as well, and that our finances are stable overall, and the state plays a role in that. So I think having that partnership is important. She's just starting. She's saying all the right things. And, you know, I personally have a good relationship with her, so I think that's something I'm counting on.
Well, how much of this is fact and how much is fiction, that the South Coast has been forgotten by Boston? It's always been kind of this thing. Oh, they in the Fall River, New Bedford. I guess the people in Springfield and Western Massachusetts say the same thing. Well, how much of it is true and how much of it is not?
Well, they say the same thing, right? So look, Massachusetts is one of a few states in the union that whose capital is also the commercial capital. If you think about across the country, that's not the standard. And so what happens is, as a result, politics tends to be inward looking. So in Boston, you have pretty much Boston is pretty much the center of commerce, the center of politics, the center of media for all of the Northeast, or at least all of New England. And as a result, it's sometimes hard for other regions of the state to work their way into the conversation. And so I've made it a point as mayor, and this is sort of stylistic on my part, but I also think necessary to be pretty assertive. And because we've been able to get a fair amount of investment into things like our port, which is undergoing a huge rebuilding right now, a very exciting rebuilding, not like the likes of which we haven't seen since New Bedford was a whaling port. We're seeing investment in our schools. We're seeing a lot of things that are happening, but it doesn't happen automatically. We've got to put ourselves out there. We've got to make our arguments and insist on, I don't say equal treatment. We're not even saying like just give us our due. We're saying we've got good things to invest in. State be a reliable partner with us.
Well, you're grabbing the offshore wind action, and you're talking about that almost weekly. I see you holding one event or another.
Right.
You're going to assemble there. You're going to move them out.
Right. So offshore wind is about to be launched in earnest in the United States. I know that Rhode Island is responsible for the first offshore wind farm. New Bedford
Block Island, not the first
one.
Yeah.
Right. But New Bedford is going to be responsible. We'll have launched the first industrial scale offshore wind project. The Vineyard Wind Project will start in earnest in a matter of weeks, and it's the first of 17 projects on the East Coast that are in some point of permitting right now. We're the closest port to the center mass of the wind energy lease areas on the East Coast, and so we're really in a pole position. And given that we're also the largest commercial fishing port in the United States, we have a marine cluster that we are capitalizing on. We think that's going to result in more investment over the years and more jobs. What we're trying to do now is to compete well. We're trying to go racing ahead of everybody else on the East Coast. I don't make any apologies for that. We're competing as much as people talk about collaboration these days. We do that too, but make no mistake, we are competing, and I think we've been successful so far, but the race is still has a ways to go.
You were in the news a couple of days ago. You lost your bus service up to Boston.
Right.
And
it was announced. It hasn't stopped just yet, but it will.
You're right, a couple of weeks.
Right.
DATCO is going to stop service to Boston. And that's your only link, public transportation, up to Boston. Now, you're getting the train. We know that.
Right.
Until you get the train, what's the stopgap? Are you going to give DATCO more money or ask the governor to give me some cash to keep this guy going until I get the train? What's the plan?
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. It's not as though New Bedford obviously is not a commuter town to Boston. We're farther away from Boston than Providence is, but there's still, we think there's about 4% of the workforce in greater New Bedford that commutes to Boston, and a number of people take the bus for that purpose, the DATCO bus.
Yeah.
And so they're cut off. They're cut off from jobs. There's students who go back and forth. They're cut off. They will be cut off in the absence of some substitute measure. And so we've been having conversation with the state about what's the best way to bridge the gap between now and when train service will start later in the calendar year. And so that could take a number of forms, right?
Yeah.
It could be subsidizing DATCO directly. It could be subsidizing some other service. It could be a shuttle bus to the end of the existing line now, which is up in Lakeville. But all these options have to be on the table. One of the things that has irked me is that we weren't given any heads up about this. Had we known 6 months ago that this was going to happen, it would be a lot easier to solve. We're scrambling right now, but I'm confident we'll find some solution.
Just a couple of minutes, I want to hit kind of a lightning round. Well, do you take DATCO at his word? The guy says, I'm losing money. And I know the train is coming, so I see the writing on the wall. I hear the train is coming, he's saying.
Yeah, look, it's a for-profit bus service, right? And so, look, we're not going to expect someone in his position to operate a for-profit business at a loss. That wouldn't be reasonable. But what is reasonable to expect is for a company that does provide a public service to give the public fair notice of his intentions, and that didn't happen. But so that's the hand we've been dealt, and we're going to figure out a solution.
I just had your counterpart in Fall River on, Mayor Coogan. He said he's having trouble recruiting police. Same thing for Mayor Smiley in Providence. What about New Bedford? I know you're talking about a bonus out there.
Yeah, we've offered a $5,000 bonus, which is for new police hires. The shortages of police are afflicting urban police departments all across the United States. It's a city problem, and some cities are having a harder time than others. We're having a hard time. We're down almost 50 officers, which is a lot, and it's going to take a long time for us to make that up. We've been using police officers more efficiently by doing things like going from 2 officer patrol cars down to 1. We've changed some staffing arrangements, but at the end of the day, we're still down significantly. So part of the problem is a cultural one. There just aren't that many young people these days who want to become police officers. And so, some of the messaging has to be about the importance of the position to one's community. And that's going to take a long time, but it takes some time to sink in.
Well, you're a former federal prosecutor. You're a law and order man, so to speak. You spent a lot of your career
Who doesn't like law and order? Come on.
But you mentioned that it's tough to get a cop. Is that because defund the police Democrats and your own party have hurt recruitment efforts? Mayor Smiley said yes.
Yeah,
what do you say?
I think it hurt. I think it hurt. Yeah, I think there were a lot of folks who it's hurt. I think recruitment. I think it has hurt retention even more. There are lots of we've seen it in our department. We've seen early retirements, and we've seen transfers to suburban departments where things are less intense. And I think some of it is that there's been a public pushback on police just for being police, which is a little scary. There have also been some cultural shifts when it comes to public service, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it with teachers. We're seeing it with the Army. The Army had its worst recruiting year in 50 years last year. Look, I think we in public service have to continue to evangelize the virtues of public service until the next generation gets it.
A good politician is a good preacher as well. Thanks for coming in. It's nice to see you again and catch up.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gene.
All right, Mayor Mitchell. In the meantime, that's 10 News Conference, your #1 longest running political show in Southern New England. A reminder, watch all of our interviews on turnto10.com. Listen to them on the radio on WPRO 6 a.m. Saturdays and Sundays.